Hey, today we have Lee Blons, Executive Director of Beacon Interfaith Housing Collaborative, which is a nonprofit that develops affordable and supportive homes. Lee has been involved with housing work for 30 years in Minnesota and 10 years before that in a different state. Hey, Lee, thanks for being here.
Thanks so much.
Yeah, tell me a little bit about your organization. What is Beacon?
So part of what makes Beacon unique is that we are a collaborative of congregations. So we have churches and synagogues and mosques that have all come together to help create homes in the community and to really advance equitable housing throughout the Twin Cities.
Great. And what are some notable projects that you've been involved in recently?
I'm excited to say that just this week I was out to celebrate the opening of our 19th apartment building in the city of Plymouth for families. And then just yesterday, the groundbreaking for Bimosedaa, which is Ojibwe for Let's Walk Together, which is focused on helping Native people who are experiencing street homelessness have a supportive housing environment to move into. So part of what makes Beacon unique is that we focus on homes that are for the lowest income in our community. We think it's really important that is where we focus our resources as a community, and that we provide the wraparound services to really help people who are leaving homelessness to have the mental health and other supports to be successful in being able to stay in their homes and move from kind of surviving to thriving.
Sure, it's all kind of about that continuum, right? Tell me a bit about Bimosedaa. We wrote about that, I think 2 weeks ago now. And can you just tell me what inspired that project and give me some of the kind of overview of that?
It really came from the trauma of the Wall of Forgotten Natives as we saw street homelessness explode here in the Twin Cities, and the number of people who were living out on the streets, and being able to work collaboratively with Native leaders, and in particular Red Lake Nation, to envision creating supportive housing and bringing our expertise to the table, but to really focus it on culturally specific services. And it'll be 48 homes in a historic building downtown. So we're restoring the Rockler Fur building. And it'll have wraparound services with Avivo Mental Health, which is our service partner in the building.
Great. I want to ask you a little bit about just affordable housing generally. What approaches have you seen to creating more affordable housing? Are you seeing any new creative approaches, or how have those approaches maybe changed in recent years? What are some of your thoughts?
We're really excited to see that there is more and more emphasis on all the levels of government toward creating more homes. So both at the city and at the county and at the state. So we are grateful that there are more resources coming and that they are more and more targeted to very low income people. So we've really seen a shift from our public officials with that focus, and understanding that the support that is needed. I think that COVID is something that impacted all of us, and we all came to understand just how important home is to keeping ourselves safe and our community safe. And so that commitment that no one would be out on the streets during that, and shelters were opened. But a lot of what we do is that next step from a shelter into a permanent home. And we're seeing more resources come that way. We've been advocating for that for a long time. Right now, it's still a ways to go. Only about 30% of the resources from public officials actually go to the lowest income. So we continue to advocate that that should be greater, but it is a change that we're seeing happen.
Yeah, when you say 30%, you mean like 30% of resources going toward housing generally are going to the lowest income?
Exactly, of the housing dollars that are out there. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Cool. What kind of services are you seeing? Like Bimosedaa, what are some of the services that are offered there, or that will be offered there?
Yeah, what we find that really works is the individual services, that everybody who's coming in out of homelessness comes with their own story and their own trauma. And so the goal is to have the staff that really can meet one-on-one. So our goal is to have one staff person for every 15 residents, so they really can have an individual relationship and really help that individual move forward in life. Yeah. And that can mean mental health services, it can mean chemical dependency services, it can mean employment, education. In our family housing, that it's around providing wraparound services for the children. One of the other big developments we're working on right now is in Scott County, Prairie Point. We would be the very first supportive housing at all in Scott County. So
Okay.
we're really grateful that the county itself has recognized there is homelessness in suburban communities and that they want to be part of the solution with us to really see what we can do to bring down the number of families experiencing homelessness in Scott County.
Yeah, I know the Representative Aisha Gomez started a Preventing Homelessness division. I think it was in the last session last year. And part of that was about showing that homelessness isn't just a metro area issue. Could you speak to that at all? Seeing, I don't know, do you guys do work in greater Minnesota, things like that?
So we don't actually do development out in greater Minnesota. We do some of our advocacy in greater Minnesota, but certainly in the suburban communities here in the Twin Cities. When we were the first deeply affordable housing in Edina in 20 years, when we opened 66 West, which was for homeless young people. And it was really an experience to understand that there are suburban young people who experience homelessness. And one of the things that was so powerful is that there were a number of city council members who were volunteers at Edina High School through a Rotary program. And one of them shared the story that they had been frustrated with the one they were kind of tutoring because he kept being late to high school. But he finally disclosed that he actually was homeless and living with an aunt and having to take 2 buses to get to school. But he had kept it a secret because he was so embarrassed. And so that city council member understood there is homelessness here in the city of Edina, and really that helped grow the support for creating homes that you might not otherwise think are needed in a community.
Yeah. What would you say are some of the key factors to reducing homelessness and helping more people to get into stable housing? I imagine public funding is maybe the crux of that, but yeah, could you speak to some of that?
Yeah, so I think one of the challenges is really to understand how big the problem is, and that one of our challenges in our current system is that we're not scaled to the problem. Right now, the federal rent subsidy program that's been around for a long time, people refer to it as Section 8, it's called housing choice vouchers. We only have enough funding in the whole country for 1 out of 4 people to get the help that they need. And, from my perspective, that would be like building enough schools so 1 out of 4 children could go to school. And so that idea that we just have not created those resources so that we can all have an affordable home is foundational. Now, a lot of people do manage to keep a home and they're not homeless, but they're paying 50, 60, 70% of their income for rent, which means all those other things in life in terms of health care, health insurance, a reliable car to get to work, school supplies, all of those things fall by the wayside. And so we're really advocating for a major shift. An example is the Met Council and other public funders of Section 8 opened up their wait list a couple years ago, and 38,000 families asked for help in 3 days.
Jeez.
And so they gathered all of those names, but they knew they didn't want to put them on the bottom of the wait list because there wasn't enough help. And so they then actually drew names and did a lottery for, I think it was about the 4,000 or 5,000 families who would go to the bottom of the wait list who might get help in 4 or 5 years. And it just helps to understand how huge the problem is and that we need to magnify and amplify the resources. One of my colleagues have said at the rate we're going right now, with the number of homes that we can create each year, it's about 1,000 affordable homes in the Twin Cities a year from all the public resources at the city, county, and state, that we're going to end homelessness in 300 years.
Jeez.
And so we just have to think differently about this.
Right. Speaking of that, I mean, how would you say we think differently? My question was going to be, what are some of the key factors for developers to make affordable housing work? What do you think? What do you think really needs to change?
Beacon has been leading a campaign called Bring It Home Minnesota at the state legislature. We have 35 organizations, all the major housing organizations signed on, and and a number of other organizations that have really come to advocate, and that would provide that rent subsidy to every Minnesotan, 550,000 Minnesotans, mostly children, that would benefit from a rent subsidy. And it's a win-win for landlords and tenants. It gives the landlord the money that they need to provide well-maintained and well-managed housing, and it creates an affordable rent. It pays the difference between what the family can afford and that cost of a decent apartment. And it's about $1 billion a year, which sounds like sticker shock. On the other hand, the state budget right now is about $52 billion. So if we could get just about 4% of the state budget, we would be able to end homelessness in the state of Minnesota and end housing instability in the state of Minnesota. Right now, the state only invests less than 0.5% of the state budget goes to housing. I spend a lot of money on healthcare and education, which are both really important. But if you don't have a home, a lot of those dollars can go to waste. So kids who aren't doing well in school are often because they're experiencing housing instability. And so to shore up those outcomes, if we could just take a slice of that and invest in homes, we believe that would dramatically, that would be the transformational change to have stable communities.
Yeah. What do you think are the obstacles keeping lawmakers from putting more of a focus on that? Or do you think that you said that's changing, but what do you think is maybe an obstacle to giving more money for housing?
Yeah, I think it is about that groundswell of support, and that we need more people speaking to their public officials about how important it is to them. We have seen, we're really pleased with Bring It Home Minnesota. Over half of the DFL caucus signed on as co-authors to Bring It Home Minnesota, which was a huge change from even just a few years ago, where housing wasn't talked about as a major issue. So we really do see the shift coming. We are disappointed, frankly, that with a $9 billion surplus, that Bring It Home was not in the governor's budget. So we continue to lean in and ask Governor Walz to take leadership on this. And we're nervous right now about what's happening in the Senate. There's been bipartisan support in the past for housing infrastructure bonds, which is money to build more homes. And there's been a focus of those dollars going for the kind of housing that Beacon does, deeply affordable. And there's always been bipartisan support. And this year, we've heard from Draheim that he is not supporting housing infrastructure bonds. And he's the chair of the committee in the Senate that is key to this. So once again, we continue to hope that we'll be able to push through with our other housing colleagues to be able to ensure that some additional housing will get built this year. Otherwise, the 1,000 homes that I talked about, we won't even reach that goal.
Right. Has that been your main point of advocacy at the legislature this session, or have you done any other work at the legislature?
Yeah, so our primary focus has been Bring It Home Minnesota and then bonding. We've been part of a broader campaign with other housing organizations that's really called for $2 billion to go for homes, things like $1 billion for the rent subsidy and things like that, and $1 billion for the capital and also for home ownership programs and things like that. So we've been part of all of that broader advocacy.
Yeah. So reflecting a bit, how have you seen housing prioritized as the legislature during this session compared to previous sessions? I know we're starting to get down to the wire, and who knows what'll happen, but what have you seen so far this session?
Yeah, there's absolutely is more focus. And you mentioned Gomez's attention to homelessness, which I think has been really helpful. We've had a lot of key legislators really help lead on that. Mike Howard is the legislator in the House that's been the chief author and really helped bring housing to the forefront, along with Alice Hausman, who's been a champion for a long time on those issues. So we see a difference, and we see people like Melissa Hortman really stepping forward and wanting to help prioritize housing. And right when the push gets to shove here at the end of the session, we're really leaning in to make sure that it will continue to hold with all of those priorities.
Yeah. Have you seen any proposals that are looking promising and looking like they might go through?
Well, we continue to think that bonding is the #1 focus for that. And then there have been some other rent protections and tax credits that we're hopeful will go through as well.
Yeah, great. I'm not sure I have any other questions. Is there anything you wanted to add that I didn't ask about?
I just think I would also name just the other changing leadership at both the local, so we see it in the city, and particularly we do a lot of work in Ramsey and Hennepin County, and the county boards have really stepped into wanting to do more around housing. Ramsey County passed its very first HRA levy to devote more resources. And so those are ways in which we are seeing a shift that will allow us to create more homes, and we're really grateful for their leadership.
Yeah, and they are really focusing specifically on that deeply affordable and that very, very low income bracket, right?
Right, and Hennepin County as well, absolutely. Yep.
Yeah, definitely. Great. Well, thank you so much. I
All right.
appreciate hearing your perspective and talking to you.
Thanks so much.
All right.
Take care.
Take care.